I had barely dragged my suitcase onto the driveway of my $880,000 home when the smell of fresh paint slapped me across the face. A power drill whirred from inside my garage, cold and steady, as if it belonged there and I did not. Then I saw the yellow city permit taped to the door, claiming owner authorization was on file. Below that line was a signature that spelled my name in a handwriting I had never used in my life. My name is Lucy Holmes. I am 36 years old, and until 40 minutes ago, I was under the impression that I owned my life. I had just landed from New York, concluding a high-stakes merger negotiation 2 days ahead of schedule. The exhaustion in my bones was a heavy, physical thing, but it was tempered by the specific relief of returning to my sanctuary. I drove my sedan through the winding, manicured streets of Canyon Brook Estates, the tires humming against the asphalt. This was not just a neighborhood, it was a statement of intent. I had paid $880,000 for this house, for the silence of the cul-de-sac, and for the right to lock a door and know that the world remained on the other side. As I turned the corner onto my street, the vision of suburban perfection shattered. A large white cargo van was parked partially on my lawn, its rear tires crushing the dormant winter grass I paid a landscaping service $200 a month to maintain. The back doors of the van were thrown wide open, revealing a chaotic gut of PVC piping, buckets of joint compound, and spools of thick electrical wire. My heart hammered a warning rhythm against my ribs. I parked behind the van, killing the engine, but I did not move immediately. I stared at my garage door. It was rolled halfway up, suspended like a heavy eyelid, inviting me to witness the violation within. A bright yellow sheet of paper was taped to the metal surface. Even from the driveway, the bold black letters were legible, permit approved. I stepped out of the car. The smell hit me instantly. It was the sharp, chemical stench of fresh primer mixed with the chalky taste of pulverized drywall. From inside the garage, the high-pitched whine of a power drill screamed, a mechanical intruder that sounded entirely too comfortable in my home. I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking on the concrete, a sharp counterpoint to the construction noise. I ducked under the garage door and stood up into a nightmare. My garage, which I had left pristine and organized with shelving units and sealed storage bins, was unrecognizable. The west wall had been completely demolished, exposing the wooden skeleton of the house. Pink insulation batting hung loose like torn flesh. The concrete floor, sealed with expensive epoxy just 6 months ago, was now scarred by a jagged trench that ran the length of the room, cut deep to accommodate plumbing lines I had never ordered. The overhead fluorescent lights had been ripped down, leaving live wires dangling from the ceiling. Standing in the center of the debris, holding a rolled-up set of blueprints, was my father, Ray Holmes. He was wearing a flannel shirt I had bought him for Christmas 3 years ago. Beside him stood Darla, my stepmother, pointing a manicured finger at the exposed studs and shouting instructions over the noise of the drill. And perched on a stack of drywall sheets in the corner was Kinsley, my 24-year-old half-sister. She was scrolling on her phone, looking bored, surrounded by the destruction of my property. "Stop," I said. My voice was low, but the acoustics of the hollowed-out garage carried it. No one heard me. The drill continued to whine. "I said stop," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat with enough force to silence the room. The man with the drill froze. He was a stranger, a contractor covered in white dust. He looked from me to Ray, confused. Ray turned slowly, his face shifting from the animated excitement of a project manager to a look of guilty surprise, and finally settling on a mask of defensive paternity. "Lucy," Ray said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You are back early. We thought you were in New York until Wednesday." "What are you doing to my house?" I asked, stepping over a pile of rubble. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it made my vision blur. "Who are these people? Why is my wall gone?" Darla stepped in front of Ray, her chin tilted up. "Don't cause a scene, Lucy. We are just making improvements. You know how Kinsley has been struggling to find a place since she finished her associate degree. The market is impossible right now. I looked at Kinsley. She had not even stood up. She smiled at me, a tight, triumphant expression that made my stomach turn. "It is going to be a studio," Kinsley said, her voice dripping with casual entitlement. "A separate entrance, a kitchenette, the works. You live here all alone. Lucy, it is ridiculous for one person to have 4 bedrooms and a 3-car garage. You do not even use this space. I actually need it." "You need it," I repeated, the absurdity of the statement nearly choking me. "I own this house. I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. You cannot just carve up my property because you decided you deserve it." I turned to the man with the drill, who was now backing away toward the driveway. "Get out," I ordered. "Pack your tools and leave, now." The man hesitated. He looked at Ray, then back at me. A second man, presumably the foreman, stepped out from the back of the garage. He was holding a clipboard and looked annoyed. "We can't just stop, ma'am," the foreman said, tapping the clipboard with a thick finger. "We are on a schedule. The slab is already cut. If we leave it like this, you will have moisture issues. Besides, the owner authorized every step of this." "I am the owner," I snapped, "and I authorized nothing." The foreman frowned, his annoyance turning into stubbornness. "I have a contract right here, signed and paid for the first phase, material costs and labor." He thrust the clipboard toward me. I snatched it from his hands. My eyes scanned the document. It was a standard renovation contract from a company called Canyon Creek Remodeling. The scope of work was detailed conversion of garage to accessory dwelling unit. Total estimated cost $45,000. And there, at the bottom of the page, was a signature. Lucy Holmes. I stared at the ink. It was my name, but it was not my hand. The loop of the L was too wide. The Y trailed off without my characteristic sharp finish. It was a clumsy imitation, the kind of forgery committed by someone who had seen my signature on birthday cards, but never on a legal document. Behind the contract was a printed email. It was sent from an address that looked like mine. "At first glance, Lucy Holmes, personal@gmail.com, but my actual email address used an underscore, not a period. The email was chatty, casual, and completely fabricated, giving explicit permission for the work to begin while I was traveling for business. "This is a forgery," I said, looking up at the foreman. "I did not sign this. That is not my email address. You are destroying my house based on a fraudulent contract." "Look, lady," the foreman said, crossing his arms. "The check cleared, 50% deposit, and these folks let us in with a key. As far as I'm concerned, everything is legal." "A key," I whispered. I spun around to face my family. Ray was looking at his shoes. Darla was glaring at me with open hostility. But Kinsley was the focal point. She reached into the pocket of her oversized hoodie and pulled out a single silver key. It was the spare key I kept hidden in a magnetic box attached to the back of the circuit breaker panel in the basement utility room. It was a hiding spot I had never told anyone about. To find it, you would have to hunt for it. You would have to toss my house looking for a way in. Kinsley twirled the key around her index finger, the metal catching the light from the open driveway. "My key," I said, the realization settling over me like a shroud. "You went through my things." Kinsley caught the key in her palm and squeezed it tight. She did not look ashamed. She looked empowered. "Your key." Kinsley laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Stop making this into a federal case. Lucy, it is a house. We are family. You have everything, and I have nothing. It is only fair that we balance the scales. Do not be selfish." She spoke the word family like it was a weapon, a shield that made her immune to consequences. I looked at the hole in my wall, the trench in my floor, and the strangers witnessing my humiliation. This was not a renovation. This was a hostile takeover. They had not just broken in. They had constructed a reality where their theft was legal, documented, and approved. I realized then that screaming would do no good. I was standing in a garage that had been legally stripped from me by the people who were supposed to protect me. Kinsley flipped the key into the air and caught it again, her eyes daring me to call the police. "Get out," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave, losing the shrill edge of hysteria and settling into a cold, flat command. I turned my back on Kinsley and looked directly at the foreman. "You are currently trespassing on private property. I am terminating this unauthorized project effective immediately. You have 10 minutes to remove your crew and your equipment before I call the sheriff's department to file a report for property damage and unlawful entry. If you leave now, I will let the lawyers handle the contract dispute. If you stay, you will leave in handcuffs." The foreman looked at the permit on the wall, then at the fury in my eyes, and finally at the check in his pocket. He made the smart business decision. He signaled to his guy with the drill. "Pack it up. We are done here." As the noise of the tools died down, the silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Ray shifted his weight, looking at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. But Darla did not shrink. She stepped into my personal space, the scent of her overly sweet floral perfume mixing nauseatingly with the dust. "You are making a mistake, Lucy," Darla hissed. Her voice had shed its public layer of saccharine warmth, revealing the jagged resentment underneath. "We are trying to help Kinsley get on her feet. You have this massive house, empty and cold, just like you. You are so selfish. You only care about your bank account and your privacy. You do not know the first thing about family." "Family asks," I said, pointing at the open garage door. "Family does not break in. Go." Kinsley slid off the stack of drywall, dusting off her jeans. She didn't look defeated. She looked annoyed, like a child told to turn off the television. "Whatever," she muttered, brushing past me. "Enjoy your empty box, Lucy." They left. I watched them pile into Ray's sedan, Kinsley in the back seat texting furiously. As soon as their taillights disappeared around the curve of the cul-de-sac, the adrenaline that had been holding me upright vanished, leaving me trembling. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to sit on the ruined floor and weep over the violence done to my sanctuary, but I could not afford to grieve yet. My house was vulnerable. I pulled out my phone. My fingers felt numb as I navigated to the camera app. I started documenting. I took photos of everything: the jagged cut in the concrete slab, the exposed wiring hanging like severed nerves, the pile of lumber stamped with the supplier's logo. I photographed the permit on the wall, ensuring the forged signature was in focus. I recorded a video, walking through the wreckage, narrating the date, the time, and the specific unauthorized damages I was seeing. 3:45 p.m., west wall demolished, load-bearing studs exposed, electrical system compromised. My voice sounded strange on the recording detached. Clinical. It was a survival mechanism. Next, I called the locksmith. I did not call the local 24-hour guy I had used once for a lockout. I called a high-end security firm that serviced the gated communities in the hills. "I need a full rekey," I told the dispatcher. "Exterior doors, garage, deadbolts, and I need it done tonight. I also want your highest-grade electronic keypad installed on the front and garage entry, with a unique code that cannot be duplicated." "That is going to be an emergency service call, ma'am," the dispatcher warned. "It will run you about $800 minimum." "I do not care," I said. "Just send someone now." While I waited, Naomi Brooks pulled into the driveway. Naomi and I had survived law school exams and corporate burnout together. She was the kind of friend who did not bring casseroles when disaster struck. She brought battle plans. She stepped out of her SUV, taking in the white van leaving and the debris on the lawn. She didn't hug me. She walked straight to me, grabbed my shoulders, and looked me in the eye. "Do not cry," she commanded softly. "Tears blur your vision. We need you sharp. Did you document the scene?" "Yes," I said, holding up my phone. "Videos and photos." "Good. Now show me exactly what they touched." We walked back into the garage. Naomi moved like a crime scene investigator, stepping carefully over the rubble. She scanned the ceiling, the walls, the corners. She stopped in the far corner, near the water heater, and frowned. "Lucy," she said, "look at this." I followed her gaze. Mounted high in the corner was the Wi-Fi security camera I had installed when I bought the house. It was supposed to face the garage doors, capturing anyone entering or leaving. It was now facing the wall. "They turned it," Naomi said, her voice chillingly calm. "This wasn't an impulsive decision. Lucy, whoever did this knew the camera was there. They climbed up a ladder and physically rotated it so it wouldn't record the demolition. They didn't just want to build a room, they wanted to hide the act of breaking the house." A cold shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't just Kinsley being a brat. This was calculated. "Come inside," I said. "I need to check the office." We entered the main house. It felt different now. The air felt violated, as if invisible eyes were watching from the shadows. I went straight to my home office. On the surface, it looked normal. My desk was tidy, my laptop was closed. But when I pulled open the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one where I kept the hard copies of my deed, my mortgage documents, and my insurance policies, I knew. The hanging folders were slightly askew. The tabs were not perfectly aligned as I always left them. I pulled out the file marked Property 880K. The papers inside were shuffled. The closing disclosure was in front of the purchase agreement. "They went through my papers," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "They were looking for the deed, or the title insurance." Naomi leaned against the doorframe, her face grim. "They were looking for leverage. They wanted to see if there were any liens. Or maybe they were looking for your social security number to set up utilities for the studio in their name." My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from Kinsley. "You locked the doors. Seriously, you are choosing war over family. You are going to look so bad to everyone. Dad is devastated. Hope you are happy with your big empty house." I read the text out loud. "She says I chose war." Naomi took the phone from me, read the message, and handed it back. "Do not reply. Anything you say can be twisted. Screen capture that message immediately." I did as she asked. Then I sat down in my desk chair, the leather creaking under me. The weight of the afternoon crashed down. The noise of the drill was gone, but the image of that signature on the permit burned in my mind. "Naomi," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The permit on the garage door, and the contract the foreman showed me, they had my signature." "They forged it?" Naomi asked. "It was not just a scribble," I said. "It was my name, spelled correctly, but the slant was wrong, the pressure was wrong. But to a stranger, to a city clerk. It looked real enough." I looked up at her, realizing the full horror of what I was saying. "I have been in New York for 5 days," I said. "I was in meetings from 7 in the morning until 8 at night. I have flight logs. I have hotel receipts. I have witnesses." Naomi's expression hardened. She understood the implication. "But the city thinks you signed it," she said. "And the contractor thinks you signed it." "Yes," I said. "But Naomi, I never signed anything. They didn't just vandalize my garage. They stole my name." The doorbell rang. It was the locksmith. The sound was sharp and startling, echoing through the house that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a fortress under siege. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Let's go. Let him in," I said. "I want every lock changed. I want this place sealed tight. If they want a war, I will give them one. But I'm not fighting with texts. I am fighting with iron and steel." The office of Elliot Crane smelled of old paper and expensive coffee. It was a comforting smell, one that usually signaled order and precision, but today it felt suffocating. Elliot sat behind his mahogany desk, a man whose tailored suit and calm demeanor were the only things anchoring me to reality. He had handled the closing on my house 2 years ago, guiding me through the mountains of paperwork with the ease of a veteran surgeon. Now, he was looking at the photos I had taken of my garage with a grim expression that made my stomach tighten. This is not a domestic dispute, Lucy, Elliot said, placing his phone face down on the desk. He laced his fingers together, his eyes locking onto mine. This is a criminal enterprise operating out of your driveway. He picked up a legal pad and began to write, the scratching of his pen the only sound in the room. Based on what you have shown me, he continued, we are looking at forgery, identity fraud, and unlawful entry, but those are just the headlines. The real danger is much quieter and much more damaging. What do you mean? I asked, leaning forward. Damaging how? The contractor, Elliot said. He has a signed contract. He has a permit issued by the city. In his eyes, he has a valid claim to be paid for the work he has done and the materials he has purchased. If you refuse to pay, which you obviously will, he can file a mechanic's lien against your property. I blinked. A lien, but I didn't hire him. It does not matter, Elliot explained, his voice patient but heavy. If he believes the contract is valid, he can place a cloud on your title. It freezes your ability to sell or refinance, and if it goes to court, you have to prove the fraud before you can get the lien removed. That takes time and money. He tore the sheet off the pad and slid it across the desk to me. It was a checklist. We need to execute a 24-hour containment strategy, Elliot said. First, preservation of evidence. You keep every text, every email, every photo. Second, I am drafting a cease and desist letter to your father, your stepmother, and your sister. It will state clearly that they are barred from the property and that any further entry will be treated as criminal trespass. Will they listen to a letter? I asked skeptically. It is not about them listening, Elliot replied. It is about establishing a paper trail that shows you unequivocally denied them access. Third, you need to file a police report, not just for the damage, but for the identity theft. He paused, tapping his pen on the desk. Fourth, and this is critical, we need to go to the city planning department. We need to contest that permit immediately. You need to file a formal request to view the owner authorization on file. Demand the original documents, not just digital copies. We need to see the wet signature. I nodded, my mind racing. I can go there this afternoon. Good. While you are doing that, I want you to contact the 3 major credit bureaus. Freeze your credit. Place a fraud alert on your Social Security number. My credit? I frowned. Elliot, they tore up my garage. They didn't open a credit card. Elliot leaned back, his expression darkening. Lucy, think about it. To get a building permit, you often need to show proof of ownership to get a contractor to start work without a massive upfront deposit. You sometimes need to show proof of funds or financing. Your filing cabinet was rifled through. They had access to your deed, your tax returns, your bank statements. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Naomi, who had been sitting silently in the corner chair taking notes, spoke up. It explains the camera, she said. If they were just squatting, they wouldn't care about the camera inside the garage. But if they were planning something long-term like refinancing the house, or taking out a loan against the equity they would need to hide their tracks until the money cleared? Exactly, Elliot said, nodding at Naomi. Which brings me to my next point, Naomi. You mentioned the camera was rotated. Can you contact the manufacturer or the cloud service provider? We need the access logs. We need to know exactly when that camera was moved and if any footage was deleted. I am on it, Naomi said. I will also canvass the neighbors. Someone on the cul-de-sac has a Ring doorbell that faces Lucy's driveway. We need independent verification of who was coming and going. My head was spinning. This was not just Kinsley being an entitled brat. This was a coordinated attack. They weren't just trying to live in my house. They were trying to steal the legal authority over it. They want to become the owners, I whispered. In practice, if not in name. Or both, Elliot said softly. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Lucy, there is something else. The permit requires an owner's signature. That is a government document. Forging a signature on a municipal application is perjury. It is a felony. Your family has crossed a line that most people don't cross unless they are desperate or incredibly confident they won't get caught. He turned back to me. Why were they so sure you wouldn't catch them? They thought I was in New York until Wednesday, I said. They thought they had 2 more days to finish the studio and present it to me as a fait accompli. They banked on guilt. Oh, it's already done. We spent the money. Just let Kinsley stay. Maybe, Elliot said. He didn't look convinced. But the level of sophistication getting a contractor, pulling a permit, forging a signature that passes city inspection that suggests a plan B. He walked back to his desk and leaned over, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I need you to go to the county clerk's office as soon as you leave the city planning department. Check the title on your house. Check the deed registry. Why? I asked, a cold knot forming in my chest. I have the deed in my safe. You have your copy of the deed, Elliot corrected. But the official record is at the county, if they were willing to forge a building permit. He let the sentence hang in the air, heavy and terrifying. If they dared to fake a permit, Elliot finished, his eyes hard as flint. I am afraid there might be something worse waiting for you in the public record. The fluorescent lights of the county clerk's office hummed with a low, headache-inducing vibration that seemed to match the frequency of my racing pulse. The air here was stale, smelling of toner ink and dust, a stark contrast to the fresh, toxic paint smell lingering in my garage. Naomi stood beside me at the counter, her hand resting firmly on my elbow, a physical anchor keeping me from drifting away into panic. We had requested the most recent filings for my address. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda, slid a thin stack of papers across the laminate counter. Here is the update from last week, Brenda said, her voice devoid of interest. Looks like a partial transfer was recorded on Thursday. My blood ran cold. A transfer? I asked, my voice barely audible. I did not authorize a transfer. Brenda shrugged, tapping the monitor. It is in the system. Honey, recorded and digitized. I looked down at the document on top of the stack. The header was standard, official, and terrifying. Quitclaim deed. I read the lines, my vision tunneling, grantor Lucy Holmes, grantee Darla Holmes, conveyance. An undivided 15% interest in the property located at 15%. They did not try to steal the whole house. That would have triggered massive tax implications and immediate red flags with the mortgage company. But 15%. It was small enough to slip through the cracks of a casual glance, yet significant enough to establish Darla as a legal co-owner. A co-owner with rights. A co-owner who could legally authorize renovations. A co-owner who could not be evicted for trespassing. My eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. There it was again. Lucy Holmes. The signature was shaky, the ink slightly uneven, as if the hand holding the pen had hesitated. Next to it was a notary stamp from someone named Marcus J. Thorne, in a neighboring county. The date of the signature was January 14th. I was in New York, I said, my voice rising. I looked at Naomi, then at Brenda. I was in a boardroom in Manhattan on the 14th. I have the flight logs. I have the meeting minutes. I physically could not have signed this document in front of a notary in this state. I am just the clerk, Brenda said, backing away slightly. If you want to contest it, you need a lawyer. I have a lawyer, I snapped. I grabbed the papers, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. And he is going to burn this whole place down. We walked out of the building and into the blinding afternoon sun. I dialed Elliot immediately. He picked up on the first ring. Tell me I am wrong, Elliot said, his tone tight. You were right, I said, leaning against Naomi's SUV for support. Quitclaim deed, 15% to Darla, recorded last Thursday. Elliot swore softly. Okay, listen to me. We are going to nuclear status. I am filing an affidavit of forgery immediately. We are going to flag the transaction in the county system. I am calling the title insurance company right now. This is exactly why you have owner's title insurance. We are claiming fraud on the title. It will freeze any further moves they try to make. 15%, Elliot, I said. Why 15? Because it gives them standing. Elliot explained rapidly. If she owns 1%, she is an owner, she can access the property, she can contest an eviction, she can borrow against her share. They are trying to weave themselves into the legal DNA of your home. As I hung up, my phone vibrated again. A photo appeared on the screen. It was Darla. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but a dark curiosity took over. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the justification. I swiped right. Hello, Lucy? Darla's voice came through the speaker, crisp and maddeningly calm. You forged a deed, I said. I did not scream. I was past screaming. You stole 15% of my house. That is a felony. Darla, that is prison time. Oh, stop with the drama, Darla sighed, as if I were complaining about a slightly overcooked steak. I did not steal anything. I secured the family's future. You were never going to share. Lucy, we know that. You hoard your money and your space like a dragon. So I did what a mother has to do. I protected the family. You are not my mother, I said, the words tasting like ash. And this is not protection. It is theft. It is insurance, she countered, her voice hardening. Now that my name is on the deed, you cannot kick Kinsley out. That studio is happening. And if you try to drag this through court, just remember who raised you. Remember who changed your diapers. Do you really want to put your father through a lawsuit? He is fragile. Lucy, the stress could kill him. Is your precious money worth your father's life? The manipulation was so precise, so practiced, it took my breath away. She was using my father as a human shield before I had even fired a shot. I will see you in court, I said, and ended the call. She is unbelievable, Naomi said. Shaking her head, she was holding her own phone up. But you need to see this. Do not freak out. She turned the screen toward me. It was Facebook. Kinsley had posted a status update 10 minutes ago. It is so sad when people get a little bit of money and forget where they came from. Some people care more about their empty guest rooms than their own flesh and blood. Praying for my sister to find her heart again. Family first greed, sad. Below the post, the comments were already rolling in from aunts, cousins, and distant relatives I hadn't seen in a decade. Unbelievable. So disappointed in Lucy. We always knew she was stuck up. They were controlling the narrative. While I was chasing legal documents, they were winning the court of public opinion. They were isolating me, painting me as the villain so that when the legal hammer fell, I would have no support system left. My phone pinged with an email notification. The subject line made my stomach drop. Notice of intent to lien. Canyon Creek Remodeling. I opened it. The contractor was not backing down. Ms. Holmes, per our conversation, the abrupt termination of the contract 4459 is a breach of terms. We have incurred material costs and labor expenses totaling $12,400. If payment is not received within 48 hours, we will be filing a mechanic's lien against the property. I looked up at the government building, then at Naomi. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows across the parking lot. They have me surrounded, I said. Darla has the deed. Kinsley has the public. The contractor has the lien. Naomi put her phone away and unlocked the car. They have surrounded a fortress. Lucy, but they forgot one thing. What is that? You built the fortress, she said, opening the door. And you know where the trapdoors are. I climbed into the car. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They wanted a fight for the house. They thought the piece of paper in the county office made them owners. They thought the social pressure would make me fold. But they didn't understand what that house was. It wasn't just wood and stucco. It was the only thing I had ever truly earned solely for myself. Drive, I told Naomi. If I do not win the paper war, I lose the house, Elliot files the affidavit today. Tomorrow, we find the notary. The adrenaline that had fueled my rage in the afternoon had metabolized into a cold. Clinical focus by evening. My dining room table was no longer a place for meals. It was a war room. Papers were spread across the mahogany surface, my legitimate documents on the left. The fraudulent ones we had recovered on the right. Naomi sat across from me, her laptop open, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. "We need to pinpoint the moment of infection," Naomi said, typing furiously. "They didn't just guess your password, Lucy, and they didn't pick the lock on a whim. They had physical access. Think back. When was the last time they were here inside the house for more than 10 minutes? I closed my eyes, replaying the last month. Since the closing 2 years ago, I had kept my family at arm's length. Dinners were at restaurants, holidays were at neutral locations. But then I remembered the exception. "The housewarming," I said, opening my eyes. 3 weeks ago, I finally caved. I invited them over for a late Christmas dinner because Darla had been guilt-tripping me about never seeing the new place. "Walk me through it," Naomi commanded. "Where were they?" Ray sat in the living room watching football, I recalled. Kinsley was wandering around taking selfies for Instagram, but Darla insisted on helping in the kitchen. I looked toward the kitchen. From the island, you had a direct line of sight to the utility room door where the breaker panel and the spare key was hidden, and just 10 feet in the other direction was my home office. "She kept sending me out to entertain Ray," I said, the realization settling like lead in my stomach. She said, "Go relax, honey. I will clean up." She was in the kitchen alone for at least 45 minutes. Naomi stopped typing. She looked at me with a sharp, terrifying question. "Where was your laptop during the party?" "It was on the kitchen counter," I said. "I was using it to stream a jazz playlist to the Bluetooth speakers." "Was it locked?" "No," I whispered. "I disabled the auto lock so the music wouldn't cut out." Naomi spun her laptop around. "Check your sent folder. Not the fake Gmail they made, your actual work email. If they were smart, they would have used your real account to initiate contact to make the fake one look legitimate later." I pulled my laptop toward me. My hands felt heavy as I navigated to the sent items. I scrolled back to the date of the party. January 5th. There were generic work replies, a few personal notes, and then, time-stamped at 8:15 p.m., right when we were cutting the pie in the living room, was an email addressed to Canyon Creek Remodeling. Subject: garage conversion inquiry. Body: hi. I am looking to move forward with the project we discussed. My assistant will follow up with details, but I wanted to confirm my interest personally. Best, Lucy. She sent it while I was eating dessert in the next room, I said, my voice trembling. She used my own computer to introduce the contractor to the fake email address she created. "Forward that to Elliot immediately," Naomi said. "He needs the header information. That proves the email originated from your IP address, from your device, but the timestamp will correlate with your witnesses placing you in the living room. It proves unauthorized access." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mrs. Gable, the elderly neighbor across the street who spent her days watching the neighborhood through her window blinds. I had texted her earlier, asking if she had seen anything unusual. I checked my Ring doorbell history like you asked. "Dear, I think you should see this." She sent a video file. I pressed play. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. The video showed a man in a Canyon Creek vest standing on my porch. The door opened, but it wasn't me who answered. It was Darla. She was wearing a silk robe, my silk robe, the one I kept in the guest bathroom. She held a thick red folder in her hand. I paused the video and zoomed in. It was the red folder from my filing cabinet, the one containing the original property survey and the deed. "She is handing him copies of my deed," I said, pointing at the screen. "Look at her face. She is smiling. She is playing the role of the lady of the manor." "And look behind her," Naomi pointed out. "In the hallway." I squinted. There was a blur of motion in the background. Someone was walking past the door, holding a measuring tape. It was Kinsley. They had been treating my house like their own personal playground while I was at work. "We have them for trespassing and unauthorized use of a computer," Naomi said. "But we need to nail the forgery." "Did Elliot send over the permit file yet?" "Just came in," I said, opening the attachment from my lawyer. The city permit application was a PDF scan. I scrolled past the technical specifications to the applicant section. There was a photocopy of a driver's license attached to the application. Required for identity verification. It was a California driver's license. It had my name, it had my address, but the photo was grainy, black and white, and slightly overexposed. "That is not me," I said. "It looks like you," Naomi argued, tilting her head. "Same hair color, same face shape." "Look at the hairline," I said. "And the chin. That is Kinsley. She is wearing glasses, I do not wear glasses. And she is wearing a blazer. I have never owned a blazer with shoulder pads like that. They photocopied a fake ID. Or she used her own and altered the text. It is a bad Photoshop job. But on a low-quality Xerox at the city planning desk, it passed." "Identity theft," Naomi noted, adding it to her list. "Federal crime." My email pinged again. This time it was from the contractor, Canyon Creek. Apparently, the threat of a fraud investigation had shaken the foreman enough to make him cooperative. He had sent over the payment history as Elliot requested. "Ms. Holmes," attached is the copy of the cashier's check used for the deposit. "We were told this was from your personal funds." I opened the image. It was a cashier's check for $22,000. The remitter line didn't say Lucy Holmes. It said Ray and Darla Holmes. "They paid for it," I said, confused. "Why would they pay $22,000 of their own money to renovate my house?" "Because they thought they already owned 15% of it," Naomi reasoned. "And they planned to own the rest soon. It wasn't spending, it was investing. They were increasing the value of the asset they intended to steal." "Or," I said, a darker thought forming. "That money didn't come from their savings. Ray has been retired for 5 years. They don't have $22,000 lying around." A new email arrived from the forensic handwriting analyst Elliot had hired. It was a preliminary report on the signature from the contract and the quitclaim deed. Subject analysis of questioned signatures. Conclusion: high probability of simulation via tracing. The ink density is uniform throughout the signature, indicating a slow, drawing motion rather than a fluid, rapid signing motion. There are microscopic hesitation marks at the peaks of the letters L and H. The forger likely placed a genuine signature of the victim under the paper and traced over it using a backlight. "Tracing," I muttered. "They didn't just practice it, they traced it like children in art class." The pieces were locking together. The housewarming party was the reconnaissance mission. The laptop was the communication tool. The stolen key was the physical access. The forged deed was the legal foothold. And the renovation was the occupation. It was a siege, a slow, methodical siege executed by the people who sat at my dinner table and ate my food. The room fell silent. Save for the hum of the refrigerator, I felt a strange sense of calm. The mystery was gone. All that remained was the mechanics of their destruction. Then, my cell phone rang. It wasn't a contact I recognized. It was a toll-free number. I usually ignored these, assuming they were telemarketers. But my nerves were raw, and my instinct told me to answer. "This is Lucy," I said. "Hello, Ms. Holmes," a professional male voice said. "This is David from the underwriting department at First National Equities. I am calling regarding the urgent voicemail we received from your mother regarding the final verification for your loan." "My mother?" I asked, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. "Yes, Darla Holmes. She is listed as the co-borrower on the application," David continued, oblivious to the ice spreading through my veins. "She mentioned you were traveling, but we really need to confirm the routing number for the disbursement. We are ready to wire the funds for the home equity line of credit based on the updated appraisal of your property." "A line of credit?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "How much is the loan for?" $250,000. David replied. Secured against the equity of your home at Canyon Brook Estates. I looked at Naomi. Her eyes went wide. They weren't just building a studio. They weren't just taking 15%. They were cashing out. They were draining the equity I had spent 10 years building. And they were about to vanish with $250,000, leaving me with the debt. David, I said, do not wire that money. David, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hand. Listen to me very carefully. I am currently recording this conversation. I did not apply for a home equity line of credit. I did not authorize a co-borrower, and I certainly did not sign any documents consenting to a lien on my property. There was a silence on the other end of the line. The kind of heavy, expensive silence that happens when a banker realizes a commission is about to turn into a compliance nightmare. Ms. Holmes, David stammered, the professional veneer cracking. We have a notarized signature on the closing documents. We have a copy of the quitclaim deed showing Darla Holmes has an interest in the collateral. The loan is in the final funding stage. The wire is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Cancel it, I ordered. Flag the application for fraud. If you wire 1 cent to that account, First National Equities will be named as a co-defendant in the lawsuit I am filing tomorrow. My lawyer is Elliot Crane, and he will be contacting your legal department within the hour. I hung up before he could argue. The room felt like it was spinning. I looked at Naomi. They tried to take out $250,000, I said, the number tasting metallic on my tongue. The renovation wasn't just about a studio for Kinsley. It was a front to increase the appraisal value so they could maximize the loan amount. They were going to strip the equity out of my house and leave me with the mortgage. Naomi was already dialing Elliot when he answered. I put him on speaker. Elliot, they went for a HELOC, I said. $250,000. It is pending disbursement. Elliot's intake of breath was sharp. That explains the rush. That explains the forged deed. They needed title standing to qualify as co-borrowers. Lucy, listen to me. We have to move fast. You need to file a police report for identity theft specifically regarding this loan application. I am sending a dispute letter to the bank's fraud unit immediately to freeze the funds. We are stopping the bleeding, but this just escalated from property fraud to major financial crimes. Do it, I said. 30 minutes later, the front gate buzzer screamed. I walked to the wall-mounted monitor in the hallway. The grainy black and white camera feed showed 3 figures standing on my porch. Ray, Darla, and Kinsley. They looked agitated. Ray was pacing. Darla was smoothing her hair, checking her reflection in the window glass. Kinsley was staring at her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. Do not open it, Naomi warned from the kitchen. Talk through the intercom. Keep the door locked. I pressed the talk button. State your business. My voice boomed out of the speaker on the porch, startling them. Ray looked up at the camera, his face twisted in a mix of anger and pleading. Lucy, open the damn door, Ray demanded. We need to talk. The bank just called your mother. They said you put a hold on the funds. What the hell are you doing? I am stopping a robbery. Ray, I said coldly. And she is not my mother. She is a woman who forged my signature to steal $250,000. It was a loan, Darla shouted, stepping closer to the camera until her face distorted in the wide-angle lens. A loan for the family business. We were going to pay it back. Kinsley and her boyfriend have a startup idea. We just needed capital. You have all this equity sitting here doing nothing. It is wasteful. So you stole it? I asked. You forged a deed to make yourself a co-owner so you could use my house as collateral. We didn't steal anything, Kinsley yelled from the back, her voice shrill. It is a family asset. You are ruining everything. We have vendors lined up. We have deposits paid. If that money doesn't come through tomorrow, we lose everything. You are ruining my life. You ruined your own life the moment you traced my signature, I replied. Now get off my property. I raised you, Ray bellowed, hitting the door with the flat of his hand. The thud vibrated through the frame. I fed you. I clothed you. I paid for your first car. Is this how you repay me? By calling the cops on your own flesh and blood over some paperwork. Open the door. Lucy, be a daughter for once in your life. I looked at the monitor. I looked at the man who had been my hero when I was 6, the man who was now standing on my porch. Complicit in a scheme to bankrupt me. I am being a daughter, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I am protecting the legacy you should have built but didn't. And Ray, you are standing there because you used a key you stole from my basement. You are not a guest. You are an intruder. I am not leaving until you sign that release for the bank, Darla screamed. You selfish, ungrateful little witch. Open this door. Naomi, I said quietly, releasing the talk button. Call the police. Naomi was already on the line with dispatch. Yes. 3 individuals refusing to leave. They are becoming aggressive. Yes. We have a restraining order pending. But this is immediate harassment. Outside. The scene was deteriorating. Kinsley was kicking the flower pots I had arranged by the door. Ray was arguing with Darla. They looked desperate. It wasn't the desperation of family. It was the desperation of gamblers who had bet the house my house and lost. 10 minutes later, a cruiser from the Canyon Brook precinct rolled up the driveway. Lights flashing silently, I watched on the monitor as 2 officers stepped out. They spoke to Ray, who gestured wildly toward the house. The officers didn't seem impressed. They pointed toward the street. Ray argued. Darla cried. But eventually, they got back into their car. As they backed out, I saw a city truck pull in behind the police cruiser. A man in a high-visibility vest walked up the driveway, carrying a clipboard and a roll of red tape. I opened the front door for the first time. The air was cool and smelled of impending rain. Ms. Holmes? The city official asked. Yes, I said. We received a priority notification from your attorney regarding a dispute of ownership authorization for the permit at this address, he said, peeling a large, bright red sticker off its backing. Until the legal ownership is clarified, all work must cease immediately. He walked over to the garage door, the door with the yellow permit that had started this nightmare, and slapped the red stop work order sticker directly over it. Anyone touches this site, they get fined $5,000 a day, he said, handing me a copy of the citation. Have a good evening, ma'am. I stood there for a moment, watching the red sticker catch the last light of the day. The police were gone. My family was gone. The construction noise was gone. I walked back inside and locked the door. The deadbolt slid home with a reassuring click. They are gone, Naomi said, handing me a glass of water. But they will be back. They are desperate for that money. I know, I said. I took a sip of water, my mind sharpening. They are clumsy. Naomi, they scream. They forge poorly. They leave digital footprints. They are reacting to me now. I walked to the table and picked up my phone. I opened my email. I saw the desperate messages from Kinsley's business partners demanding payment. I saw the thread where Darla had admitted to the contractor that Lucy is traveling, so I will handle the paperwork. I realized then that I didn't just need to defend myself. I needed to let them dig. I am not going to block their emails anymore, I told Naomi. I am going to let them talk. I am going to switch from defensive to offensive. They want to play with contracts. Fine. I will send them a contract. What kind of contract? Naomi asked. A trap, I said. They claimed they did the renovation for me. Right? That they improved my property. I am going to ask them to itemize their contribution. I will ask them to put in writing exactly what they did and why they felt authorized to do it. I will tell them I am considering a settlement to reimburse their costs if they can prove the work was necessary. Naomi smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. You are going to get them to confess to the unauthorized changes in writing under the guise of a reimbursement claim. Exactly, I said. And once they send that list, they have admitted to the actus reus for the criminal damage charge. They think they are negotiating a payout. I am just drafting their confession. The house was silent, but the digital world was screaming. I sat at my kitchen island, a glass of cold water sweating onto the granite, my phone lying flat in the center of a circle of light. Naomi was across from me, her posture rigid, watching the screen like a sniper waiting for a target to break cover. "Do not pick up if they call," Naomi reminded me. "Text only, email only. We need them to write their own indictment." I nodded. I had sent a text to Darla 10 minutes ago. It was a masterpiece of feigned resignation. I had written, "I am looking at the contractor's invoice. The cancellation fees are high. I need to understand why this started without me. If I am going to pay for any of this, I need to know exactly how the permit got approved so quickly when I was out of town." It was the bait. I dangled the possibility of me paying the one thing they wanted more than anything and waited for them to snap at it. The phone buzzed. Naomi and I both leaned in. It was Darla. "Honey, I told you." The text read, "The contractor had an opening in his schedule that week. If we didn't sign right then, we would have lost the slot for 3 months. I signed the application for you to keep the project moving. I was just acting as your proxy to help you out. It is standard stuff." "Got her," Naomi whispered, her finger hovering over the screen. "Screenshot that, now." I captured the image. "She just admitted to signing it," I said, feeling a grim satisfaction. "She thinks proxy is a magic word that makes forgery legal. She doesn't realize she just confessed to falsifying a government document to secure a financial benefit." "Now, Kinsley," Naomi said, "ask about the access. Make it sound like you are worried about security." I typed, "Okay, but how did the crew get inside on the first day I have the alarm logs? I just want to make sure the code wasn't compromised." Kinsley's reply came 2 minutes later, blistering with teenage attitude. "OMG, stop being so paranoid. I didn't hack your precious alarm. I made a copy of the spare key from the breaker box when we were there for the Christmas party. You left the room to get wine." It took 2 seconds. Chill out. I stared at the words. I made a copy. It took 2 seconds. "Burglary tools," I said, my voice flat. "Possession of stolen property, unlawful entry." "She thinks she is winning an argument," Naomi said, shaking her head. "She has no idea she is testifying against herself." I forwarded the screenshots to Elliot. Within minutes, my laptop pinged with his reply. "This is excellent. We have moved from," he said, she said, "to a documented confession. I am packaging this for the district attorney's investigator. Do not engage further. You have enough." But the evidence kept coming. The contractor, realizing he was caught in the middle of a felony fraud investigation, decided to save his own skin. He emailed me a zip file containing his communication logs. There were voicemails from Darla, instructing him to bill the account on file and assuring him that "my daughter is just too busy to talk. I handle the finances." There was a credit card authorization form for the initial materials, signed with that same shaky, traced version of my name. "He is throwing them under the bus to avoid a lawsuit," I noted, scrolling through the files. "He knows if he doesn't cooperate, I will sue him for the demolition costs." "It is working," Naomi said. "The walls are closing in." The next morning, Elliot called. His voice was brisk, energized. "I have spoken with the detective assigned to the fraud division," Elliot said. "With the text messages and the handwriting analysis, they are upgrading the classification. This is no longer a civil dispute. They are looking at forgery in the first degree and attempted financial fraud regarding the bank loan. The detective wants to interview you tomorrow." "What about my safety?" I asked. "They are desperate. Elliot, Ray was banging on my door last night." "That is the next step," Elliot said. "I am filing for a temporary protective order this afternoon. Based on the harassment, the unauthorized entry, and the attempt to liquidate your equity, we have grounds to argue that they pose a credible threat to your property and your financial security. Once the judge signs it, if they step foot on your driveway, they go to jail." The order was granted at 4 o'clock that afternoon. The sheriff's deputy served them at their apartment across town. I didn't see it happen, but I could imagine the scene. Ray shouting about his rights, Darla crying about family, Kinsley rolling her eyes until the reality of the court mandate hit her. But stupidity, as I was learning, is a powerful force. It often overrides survival instincts. That night, around 11 o'clock, the house was dark. Naomi had gone home to change clothes. Promising to be back in the morning, I was alone, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows. My phone on the nightstand lit up. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from the security app. Motion detected driveway. Front entry. I grabbed the phone and pulled up the live feed. The infrared camera painted the world in ghostly shades of gray and white. A figure was walking up my driveway. They were wearing a hoodie, hood up, moving with a jerky, agitated rhythm. It was Kinsley. She walked right past the stop work sticker on the garage. She marched up to the front door, on the screen. I saw her look around, checking for witnesses. Then, she reached into her pocket. She pulled out a silver key. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was the stolen key, the one she bragged about copying. She slid it into the lock. I watched her hand twist. Nothing happened. She twisted harder, jiggling the handle. The new high-security deadbolts I had installed $300 apiece didn't budge. She shoved the door with her shoulder, frustration evident in her body language. "Go away," I whispered to the screen. "Just go away. Kinsley." She didn't go away. She kicked the door. Then, she walked over to the keypad I had installed and started punching in numbers. She was guessing. Birthdays, anniversaries. System alert. 3 failed attempts. Alarm sequence initiating. A split second later, the house erupted. The internal sirens screamed at 110 decibels. A piercing, oscillating wail that was designed to wake the dead. Outside, the strobe lights on the eaves began to flash, turning the driveway into a chaotic disco of blue and white light. On the screen, Kinsley jumped back as if she had been physically struck. She covered her ears, looking up at the flashing lights in panic. She turned to run, but she tripped over the garden hose she hadn't seen in the dark. I was already on the phone with the police. "This is Lucy Holmes at 440 Canyon Creek," I shouted over the siren. "I have an intruder attempting to breach the front door. I have a protective order in place against this individual." The alarm is sounding. "We have officers en route," the dispatcher said, calm but urgent. "Is the individual still on the premises?" "She is in the driveway," I said, watching the screen. Kinsley was scrambling to her feet, but she was disoriented by the noise and the lights. 2 minutes. That was all it took. The patrol car that had been circulating in the neighborhood, likely alerted by the earlier report, screeched to a halt at the curb. I watched as 2 officers approached her. Flashlights cutting through the darkness. Kinsley started shouting, waving her hands. I couldn't hear what she was saying through the camera, but I saw the officer shake his head. He pointed to the ground. She didn't comply. She pointed at the house, screaming something about her things, about her studio. The officer didn't argue. He spun her around. He pulled her arms behind her back. I saw the glint of handcuffs. I turned off the alarm code so the silence could return. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. They were putting her in the back of the cruiser. She looked small. She looked furious. But mostly, she looked defeated. My phone buzzed. It was Elliot. He must have been notified by the security company. "Everything okay?" I typed back. My fingers steady. "Kinsley just tried the old key. The police took her. Breach of peace, trespassing, and violation of the protective order." Elliot's reply was immediate. "That is it. She just gave us the leverage to bury them. Do not go outside. Let the police handle the booking. I will be at the station in the morning to ensure they file the charges." I watched the police car drive away, the red tail lights fading into the night. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was the finality of it. They had pushed and pushed and pushed, believing that family meant forgiveness, that blood meant they could bleed me dry without consequence. But they had forgotten that I was a businesswoman before I was a sister. And tonight, business had just concluded. The lawyer my family hired was a man named Arthur Henderson. He was a strip mall generalist whose website boasted about handling everything from slip-and-fall cases to uncontested divorces. He looked tired when he walked into Elliot's conference room, his suit slightly ill-fitting, carrying a briefcase that had seen better decades. I did not attend the meeting. I refused to sit in the same room as the people who had tried to liquidate my future. Instead, I sat in the adjacent office, listening through the speakerphone Elliot had left active on the table. "My clients are distraught," Henderson began, his voice wheezing slightly. "This has all been a terrible misunderstanding within the family. Mr. and Mrs. Holmes simply wanted to improve their daughter's property. They are willing to drop their claim to the studio if Ms. Holmes agrees to withdraw the police report and the restraining order. We want to settle this quietly. To save everyone the embarrassment." Elliot's voice was like ice cracking. "Mr. Henderson, your clients forged a deed, falsified a municipal permit application, and attempted to defraud a national bank of $250,000. There is no misunderstanding. There is only a felony file that is growing thicker by the hour. We are not here to discuss my client's embarrassment. We are here to discuss your client's surrender." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The shift in their tactic was palpable. The aggression of the garage invasion was gone. The screaming on the porch was gone. Now, they were trying to barter with currency they did not have. After the meeting, the tone of their communication changed drastically. The threats stopped. The guilt trips began. Ray sent an email. It was long, rambling, and riddled with typos. "Lucy, I know we messed up with the paperwork, but I am your father. I changed your diapers. I taught you how to ride a bike. Are you really going to send me to jail at my age? We can fix the garage. I will come over and sweep up the dust myself. Just tell the lawyer to stop, please." Then came the voicemails from Darla. She sounded broken, her voice wet with tears. "Honey, please pick up. Kinsley is terrified. She has a court date for the trespassing charge. It will ruin her record. She won't be able to get a job. We just wanted to be close to you. That is why we wanted the studio, to be a family again. Please, Lucy, have a heart." I listened to them once, then saved them to the evidentiary hard drive. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was a distant, dull ache, like pressing on an old bruise. They still didn't get it. They were apologizing for the consequences. Not the action. They were sorry they got caught. Not that they had violated me. "Do not reply," Elliot advised when I showed him the transcripts. "They are testing the fence. If you show a crack of sympathy, they will pry it open." "I am not sympathetic," I said. "I am ready to end this. Draft the settlement offer." We laid out the terms. It was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. First, full reimbursement for the restoration of the garage to its original condition, estimated at $18,000. Second, payment of my legal fees, which were currently hovering around $12,000. Third, the immediate removal of the mechanic's lien filed by the contractor. Fourth, a permanent, non-expiring restraining order barring them from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. And the big one, I told Elliot. I want them to sign an affidavit of forgery. I want a sworn statement, notarized, admitting that they falsified the deed and the loan documents without my knowledge or consent. Elliot tapped his pen on the desk. That is the one they will fight. Lucy, signing that affidavit is essentially signing a confession for the district attorney. It hands the criminal case to the state on a silver platter. If they don't sign it, I said, then the title insurance company will sue them anyway to clear the deed, and the bank will pursue them for fraud. At least if they sign it for me, I might advocate for leniency at sentencing. That is the only carrot I'm offering. We cannot settle the civil side until the bank clears the HELOC issue, Elliot reminded me. Until First National Equities officially closes that loan file and confirms no money was disbursed, you are still at risk. Do not sign anything until we have that confirmation in writing. While we fought the legal battle, Kinsley opened a new front. If she couldn't break into my house, she would break into my reputation. She took to social media. She posted videos on TikTok and Instagram, crying into the camera, using filters that made her look pale and fragile. She didn't use my full name, but she used enough details for people to connect the dots. My wealthy sister is suing her own parents because we tried to fix up her garage for her. She sobbed in one video that garnered 50,000 views in 3 hours. She has $1 million house and she is letting us starve. She called the cops on me for trying to get my jacket back. Narcissist abuse is real. Guys, the internet mob, hungry for a villain, took the bait. The comments were vicious. Eat the rich. What a monster. Family is everything. How could she? 2 days later, I was called into the HR office at Meridian Hollow Strategies. My boss, a pragmatic woman named Sarah, sat with the HR director. On the table was a tablet playing Kinsley's video. "Lucy," Sarah said, her voice careful, "we do not get involved in personal lives, but this is starting to get traffic. We have had 2 emails from clients asking if the heartless sister works here. It reflects poorly on the firm's values." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. This was the one place I thought was safe. My career was the one thing I had built that had nothing to do with my family. "This is a legal matter involving severe financial fraud and identity theft against me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The individual in that video is currently facing criminal charges for trespassing and forgery. I am the victim here. I have maintained professional silence to protect the integrity of the investigation, but I can provide the police reports if necessary." The HR director looked at Sarah. Sarah nodded. "We value you." "Lucy," Sarah said, "but we need this noise to stop. If this becomes a PR problem, we will have to reassess." I walked back to my desk. My hands shaking, Kinsley was trying to burn down the only thing I had left. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go online and post the photos of the destroyed garage, the forged signature, the police report, but I stayed silent. I let them lie. Because every lie they told was another nail in their coffin when the truth finally came out in court. The pressure on Darla, however, was becoming unbearable. The title insurance company, a behemoth with unlimited legal resources, had launched their own investigation. They froze the assets of everyone involved in the deed transfer. The bank's fraud unit had flagged Ray and Darla's joint checking account. Suspecting it was being used for money laundering related to the loan scheme, the noose was tightening. They were running out of money, running out of lies, and running out of time. That afternoon, Henderson called Elliot again. I was in the office this time. "My clients are considering the terms," Henderson said, his voice sounding thinner than before. "But they have a concern about the affidavit of forgery. They feel it exposes them to excessive liability. They exposed themselves to liability when they traced my client's signature," Elliot retorted. "Take the deal, Arthur. It is the best they are going to get. If we go to trial, I will ask for punitive damages that will garnish their Social Security checks for the rest of their lives." There was a long pause on the line. Then, Henderson spoke, his voice dropping to a lower, more ominous register. "Ms. Holmes is listening. Isn't she?" Henderson asked. "I am here," I said. "Listen, Ms. Holmes," Henderson said, "you are winning. We know that. You have the law. You have the money. You have the facts. But my clients? They are family, and families have secrets." "Is that a threat?" Elliot asked sharply. "It is a caution," Henderson replied. "Darla mentioned something about the down payment on that house 2 years ago. She said if you push them too hard, if you try to destroy them completely, she will be forced to bring up the source of those funds. She said you know what she's talking about." The room went silent. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my back. "I earned every cent of my down payment," I said, my voice firm, but my heart skipped a beat. "I am sure you did," Henderson said. "But public records can be messy things, and investigations can go both ways. If you demand that affidavit, you might lose more than you think." He hung up. Elliot looked at me, his eyebrows raised. "What is he talking about? Lucy? Is there anything at all about the purchase of this house that isn't clean?" "No," I said instantly. "I saved for 5 years. I liquidated my 401k. It is clean." But as I said it, a memory flickered in the back of my mind. A small, insignificant detail from 2 years ago. A gift Darla had insisted on giving me to help with the closing costs. A check for $5,000 that I had deposited, and then immediately forgotten about because the total down payment was nearly $200,000. They were going to weaponize a gift. They were going to claim the house was purchased with family funds to claim an equitable interest. They are bluffing, I told Elliot. They have nothing. Let's hope so, Elliot said, closing the file. Because if they find a way to muddy the title legitimately, this lawsuit doesn't end. It restarts. The envelope from First National Equities arrived via overnight courier. A thick, rigid package that felt heavy in my hands. I opened it at my kitchen counter. It was not a rejection letter. It was a notice of funding suspension. I read the paragraphs, my eyes scanning for the details Elliot had requested. The bank confirmed that the home equity line of credit application had passed all underwriting stages. The appraisal boosted by the permitted renovation in progress had come in high enough to support a loan of $250,000. But the most chilling detail was at the bottom of page 3, under the section labeled Disbursement Instructions. The funds were not scheduled to go into Ray and Darla's joint checking account. They were routed to a business checking account at a completely different bank. Beneficiary K5 Ventures, LLC. I took a photo of the document and texted it to Elliot. Who is K5 Ventures? Elliot's response took an hour. When he called, his voice was grim. I ran a corporate search. K5 Ventures was incorporated 6 months ago. The registered agents are Kinsley Holmes and a man named Jared Thorne. Jared, I said, the name sounding vaguely familiar. That is her boyfriend, the one who sells crypto courses on Instagram. It gets worse, Elliot continued. I had my paralegal dig into public lien records. K5 Ventures is currently named in 2 lawsuits for breach of contract and unpaid commercial rent. They are drowning. Lucy, they owe upwards of $80,000 to investors and landlords. I lowered the phone, staring at the scarred floor of my kitchen where the contractor had tracked in dust. The picture finally came into sharp, high-definition focus. This wasn't about Darla wanting a mother-in-law suite. It wasn't about Ray wanting to be close to his daughter. It was a rescue mission. Kinsley and Jared were in deep financial trouble. They needed a bailout, and they didn't have the credit to get one. So they looked at my house, my equity, my credit score, my hard work, and saw a piggy bank they could smash open. The garage was step 1, I said to Naomi, who was organizing a stack of flight receipts on the table. They needed to show improvements to juice the appraisal value. Step 2 was the HELOC to pay off Kinsley's debts. And Step 3 was the blackmail, Naomi finished, not looking up from her spreadsheet. Once the money was gone and the lien was on your house, they would have guilt-tripped you into paying the monthly bill to avoid foreclosure. They were going to hold your own credit score hostage to force you to subsidize their mistakes. It was monstrous. It was a calculated predation that turned my stomach. Later that afternoon, the courier arrived again. This time, it was the final report from the forensic document examiner. It was a bound booklet, 20 pages long, filled with microscopic enlargements of signatures. The conclusion was devastatingly absolute. Exhibit A, the deed, and Exhibit B, the permit exhibit, clear evidence of guideline tracing. The forger placed the genuine signature under the document and traced it. This is evidenced by the uniform pen pressure and the lack of fluid, ballistic movement found in natural handwriting. Furthermore, the tremor of forgery is visible under 20 times magnification at the start of the capital L. This is the nail in the coffin, Elliot said when we met at his office to prepare the final motion. We are not just asking for a summary judgment. I am filing a motion to void the deed ab initio, meaning it is treated as if it never existed, and I am asking for a permanent injunction preventing them from ever filing a document related to this property again. What about the family secret Henderson threatened? I asked. Elliot shook his head. I looked into the $5,000 Darla gave you. It was a personal check. The memo line said, housewarming. In the eyes of the law. That is a gift. not an equity buy-in, even if they try to claim it was an investment. The statute of frauds requires real estate interest to be in writing. They have nothing. Lucy, they are bluffing with a pair of twos. Naomi had spent the day constructing the timeline that would serve as our shield in court tomorrow. She taped a large piece of paper to the wall of Elliot's conference room. January 14th, Naomi said, tapping the date with a marker. The date the deed was notarized in this county. Here is your Delta Airlines boarding pass, Flight 305, departing JFK at 10 in the morning. Here is the Uber receipt from JFK to your apartment in Tribeca. Here is the credit card timestamp for your lunch at a deli in Midtown at 1:30 in the afternoon. She drew a thick red line connecting the events. Unless you have the ability to teleport, Naomi said, it is physically impossible for you to have signed that deed. The notary, Mr. Marcus J. Thorne, is going to lose his license, and I'm willing to bet he is related to Jared Thorne, Kinsley's boyfriend. He is his uncle, Elliot confirmed. We found the connection on Facebook. The notary was in on it. My phone rang. It was Arthur Henderson again. I nodded to Elliot. He put it on speaker. Ms. Holmes. Henderson sounded exhausted. The fight had left his voice. My clients are prepared to offer a full surrender. They will sign a quitclaim deed returning the 15% interest to you. They will pay the restitution for the garage over a 5-year period. They just ask that you drop the civil suit so the criminal charges might be mitigated. No, I said. Ms. Holmes, please, Henderson pleaded. They are your parents. A trial will destroy them publicly. They destroyed themselves when they decided my house was their ATM, I said, my voice steady. Mr. Henderson, if they sign a quitclaim deed now, it implies they had a valid interest to give back. They didn't. That deed was a forgery. I do not want them to give me my house back. I want the court to declare that they never took it. We will see you at 9 o'clock, Elliot said, and ended the call. That night, the house felt enormous. The silence was absolute. The frantic energy of the last week, the police, the alarms, the lawyers had faded into a tense, waiting stillness. I walked out to the garage. I didn't turn on the main lights. I stood in the shadows, illuminated only by the street lamp filtering through the windows. The space was a wreck. The trench in the floor was a dark scar running through the concrete. The insulation hung from the walls like Spanish moss. The smell of dust and dry rot was still thick in the air. It looked like a war zone, and in a way, it was. This was where the invasion had started. Naomi walked in behind me, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. She didn't say anything at first. She just handed me a mug and stood beside me, looking at the destruction. You know, Naomi said softly, most people would have paid them. Most people would have been too afraid of the scandal, or too guilty about the family card, and they would have written a check just to make it go away. I almost did, I admitted, looking at the red stop work sticker on the back of the garage door. For a minute, when I first saw them, I thought maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I did have too much space. And now, I took a sip of the tea. It was hot, grounding me in the present. Now I know that space isn't about square footage, I said. It is about boundaries. They didn't just break a wall, Naomi. They broke the basic contract of human respect. They looked at me and didn't see a person. They saw a resource, a signature to be traced. I walked over to the workbench where my father had set up his tools during the demolition tools he had bought with my money. I ran my hand over the rough wood. Tomorrow is going to be ugly, I said. Darla will cry. Kinsley will scream. Ray will look at me like I'm the devil. But you will win, Naomi said. I am not doing this to win, I replied, turning to face her. The shadows stretched long across the broken floor. And I am not doing it for revenge. I don't care about punishing them anymore. That is the state's job. I looked down at the owner authorization permit still taped to the wall, the fake signature mocking me in the dim light. Tomorrow, I said, my voice ringing with finality in the hollow room. I am going to court for one reason, because I will not let anyone, ever again, decide who I am or what I own. I am taking my name back." The air in the courtroom was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and anxiety. It was a stark contrast to the dust and chaos of my garage. Yet this was where the real demolition was about to happen. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Elliot, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, Ray, Darla, and Kinsley sat in a sullen row. They looked smaller here, stripped of the bravado they had displayed on my porch. Ray stared at his shoes. Darla was wearing a conservative navy dress, clutching a tissue, playing the role of the distraught matriarch. Kinsley was chewing a fingernail, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Judge Harrison entered, his robes billowing. He was a man known for his impatience with frivolous lawsuits, and I prayed he would see that this was anything but frivolous. "We are here to address the motion for summary judgment and the request for a permanent injunction in the matter of Holmes versus Holmes," the judge stated, his voice booming without a microphone. "Mr. Crane, you may proceed." Elliot stood up. He didn't use grand gestures. He used gravity. He walked to the easel set up in the center of the room and unveiled the first exhibit, the large, high-resolution photo of my garage, the wall torn open, the pipes exposed, the yellow permit glowing like a toxic warning sign. "Your Honor," Elliot began, "this is not a dispute over a renovation. This is a crime scene." He moved methodically through the evidence. He presented the text messages where Darla admitted to signing as my proxy. He showed the flight logs proving I was in New York while my signature was allegedly being notarized in California. He played the video of the doorbell camera, showing Darla handing over my deed to the contractor. Then, he called the representative from First National Equities, a man named Mr. Henderson took the stand, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Henderson," Elliot asked, "can you confirm the status of the home equity line of credit application regarding the property at Canyon Brook Estates?" "It was approved for funding," Mr. Henderson stated. "We had a signed loan agreement and a notarized deed adding Mrs. Darla Holmes to the title. We were prepared to wire $250,000 to an account held by K5 Ventures, LLC." "And who stopped the disbursement?" "The plaintiff, Ms. Lucy Holmes," Mr. Henderson replied. "She alerted our fraud department less than 12 hours before the transfer." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. $250,000. It was a number that turned a family dispute into grand larceny. Arthur Henderson, the defense attorney, tried to salvage the sinking ship. He stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Your Honor, my clients admit that the paperwork was irregular, but the intent was never malicious. This was a family project. Mrs. Holmes believed she had implied consent to act on her daughter's behalf. It was a misunderstanding born of love." Judge Harrison peered over his glasses. "Counselor, you can misunderstand a dinner invitation. You do not misunderstand tracing a signature onto a federal loan application. That is forgery." The defense crumbled when Kinsley took the stand. Elliot didn't even have to push hard. He simply projected the screenshot of her text message onto the screen. "I made a copy of the spare key from the breaker box when we were there for the Christmas party." "Ms. Holmes," Elliot asked, "did your sister give you permission to take that key?" Kinsley looked at the screen, then at me, and finally at her mother. The pressure was too much for her fragile ego. "I didn't want to do it," Kinsley blurted out, her voice cracking. "Mom said we needed the money for the business. She said Lucy has plenty of money and she wouldn't even miss the equity. She told me to get the key so the contractor could get in." "Kinsley!" Darla shrieked from the defense table. Standing up, "You keep your mouth shut." "Order." Judge Harrison slammed his gavel. "Mrs. Holmes, sit down or I will have you removed." "She is lying," Darla cried, her face flushed with panic. "I was trying to help her. She is the one in debt. She begged me to fix it." "You traced the signature." "Mom," Kinsley screamed back, tears streaming down her face. "I saw you do it on the kitchen table with the flashlight under the paper." The courtroom went dead silent. The confession hung in the air, undeniable and devastating. They had turned on each other, their family-first motto disintegrating the moment consequences appeared. Elliot sat down. "No further questions, Your Honor." The final blow came from the forensic document examiner. He set up a display showing the microscopic analysis of the deed. "This is not a freehand simulation," the expert explained, pointing to the jagged ink lines. "This is a direct tracing. You can see here, at the top of the letter L, where the pen paused while the forger adjusted the underlying paper. This requires intent, preparation, and a light source. It is impossible to produce this result accidentally." The mask had fallen. There was no loving mother, no well-meaning father. There were only 3 desperate people who had plotted to rob me. Judge Harrison didn't need a recess. He looked at the defense table with undisguised disgust. "I have seen enough," the judge said. "The court finds that the quitclaim deed recorded on January 14th is a fraudulent instrument. It is hereby voided ab initio and shall be stricken from the county record. The plaintiff is the sole and exclusive owner of the property." He turned his gaze to Ray and Darla. "Regarding the request for a protective order, given the unauthorized entry, the theft of the key, and the fraudulent financial schemes, the court grants a permanent restraining order. You are to have no contact with the plaintiff and must remain at least 500 yards from her property and place of employment. Violation will result in immediate arrest." He wasn't done. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am referring the transcripts of this hearing, specifically the admission of forgery and the testimony regarding the loan application, to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. You may have settled the civil liability, but the fraud against the bank and the state is not yours to settle." The color drained from Ray's face. Darla slumped in her chair, weeping silently. Kinsley just stared at the floor, defeated. The final settlement was read into the record. They were ordered to pay $18,400 for the restoration of my garage and $12,000 in legal fees. The lien was dissolved. It was over. 3 months later, I stood in the center of the garage. The smell of dust and deception was gone, replaced by the scent of sanded pine and fresh white paint. The trench in the floor had been filled and polished to a smooth shine. The walls were sealed. It wasn't a pottery studio. It wasn't a guest room. I had turned it into a workshop for restoring antique furniture, a hobby I had loved in college but gave up because I didn't have the space. Now, a beautiful stripped oak table stood in the center, waiting for a new coat of varnish. Naomi walked in, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. The evening sun cast long, golden rectangles across the floor. "To the victor," Naomi said, handing me a glass. "No," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "Not to the victor, to the architect." "The architect?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I rebuilt this," I said, gesturing to the room. "Not just the walls. I rebuilt my life. I learned that no is a complete sentence. I learned that DNA is not a suicide pact." We drank. The bubbles were crisp and cold. "Do you miss them?" Naomi asked quietly. I thought about it. I thought about the silence of my phone, no longer ringing with guilt trips. I thought about the holidays I would spend alone or with friends, without the fear of judgment. "I miss who I thought they were," I admitted, "but I do not miss who they are." I walked to the door and looked out at the driveway. The stop work sticker was gone. The yellow permit was gone. The only thing on the door was a solid, heavy deadbolt that only I had the key to. "This house isn't a castle, Naomi," I said, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "It is a boundary, and for the first time in my life, the line is drawn in concrete." That night, I went upstairs to my bedroom. I didn't check the cameras. I didn't check the locks. I knew they held. I climbed into bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was full of peace, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of falling. My name belonged to me again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear from you. Please Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening to this story from. I really want to connect with you all. Make sure to subscribe to the channel Leona Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.